But no, I was making a video today. In fact, you can give me your opinion. You can let me know about this. So I think that multiplayer experiences within MMORPGs, such as dungeons or raids or any kind of skirmish things, I think they should be available far earlier than most games give you access to them.
I think that's just, it's such a weird thing when we talk about the marketing in that regard as well, because you brought up that, you know, the game doesn't market itself super well. I've never felt like they've really shouted about what makes the game great. It's always very kind of wishy-washy, like, oh, you know, come play our game and explore the world and, you know, make your character and, wow, it's so good, guys, come play the game. They're not saying, yeah, our game's got the best world versus world. You know, they're not flexing on people. And I think they really should.
And someone walked up to me halfway through and went, I'm sorry to disturb you, but are you cosplaying as Josh Strife Hayes?
Oh.
They're like, no, it's actually me. And their face just kind of twisted and went, oh my god, I'm so sorry. Because they thought that I looked kind of like me, but not enough like me to be me.
Hello?
Oh my goodness, is that the 10,000 viewer Guild Wars 2 streamer, the MightyTeapot?
It absolutely is. I am famous.
Dude, you are doing so well. Congratulations on the incredible success you've seen today. How have you been, man?
I'm doing good. You know, I honestly wasn't expecting it to be this crazy. You know, I think that, you know, to get down to brass tacks, I guess, a little bit, like I think there's a lot of people that play Guild Wars 2. They just aren't very engaged, right? But yeah, it's been absolutely insane, right? Like absolutely insane.
It's the perfect kind of background chill out game, because there is incredibly hardcore content in it for the people who want to play it hardcore. There is very casual content for the people that want to play casual. There is amazing exploration. I still, whenever anyone comes up to me and says, I've never played an MMORPG before, what game should I play? Guild Wars 2 is the answer. That's what you should start with. You should eventually go to all of them, but this is where you should start, because it is such a well-made game. But no, dude, come on, tell me about you. We haven't spoke for ages. I've missed you. Fill me in. What have you been doing with yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, the really big thing that I've been working on is actually the website that I've been relentlessly shilling throughout this rather impressive stream, actually. Because I've always wanted to do something like that and create like a really big resource, because I've always felt that Guild Wars 2 is a game that, for whatever reason, it does seem to be a little bit tricky to get into. And so I've been really working on that website for a lot. And honestly, the team is incredible, right? Like, it's really, I've always known that people are really passionate about video games and view it as a little bit more than a hobby, honestly. But I've got to say that, like, working on the Hardstuck project with everyone involved, it's been very humbling, to be honest. Like, these are some incredibly talented people, some unbelievably passionate people, and it's been incredibly gratifying to work on it. I've been scurrying around and obliterating my sleep schedule and enjoying doing it as well. Over the past kind of couple of weeks, trying to scramble. Like, we kind of got the news that Steam was coming out, and it was like, oh my god. Well, okay, we're dead, because we were expecting it to be a lot later, maybe towards the end of the year, or even next year, actually, because we were expecting them to finish releasing the Living World Season 1, the old content that's coming back to the game before Steam, maybe even World vs. World Alliances, but that didn't happen. We're already there right now, so it was a huge scramble, but it was a lot of fun to do, for sure.
You know, that passion is actually a perfect example of something that I'm going to be talking about. You mentioned the Insomnia Festival, which is in 2 days' time. I'm super excited about going down there. When there is another Insomnia, I want to get you down. Man, you've got to take some time away. You work too hard on this. You've got to take some time away. You've got to make sure there's a free bar, dude. So I'm dragging you to the free bar, and we're going to talk about Guild Wars, and it's going to be a good time. But I'm giving a talk, actually, on how you create a community in any game, online, whether it's Final Fantasy or Guild Wars 2 or anything. And it sounds silly, but the way you create a community is by having so much passion for your game that you can't not create a community. You want to make videos because you love it. You want to share your passion because you care so much. It's almost overflowing out of you that you have to create something that people will gravitate toward. People often say, what kind of YouTube channel should I make? And if they need to be told what to do, they don't necessarily have the passion to do something for long enough to create a difference. You started your channel and you started the Hardstuck because you have so much love for this game that you need to do something with that love. You need to create something, and it's that that builds the community, and it's that that gets 10,000 people hanging out with you. Well deserved.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. I very much appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you, of course.
Dude, I was just sat in my room making videos.
Yeah.
That's all I do.
Well, I mean, that's the story, though, isn't it? Right? Isn't that just the perfect description for it? I think that's how it always is to an extent, right? Like, you're sat in your room making videos, you're talking to a camera, like waving, like flailing your arms around on camera on Twitch. That's exactly what it is. Like, that's the beginning of it. And ultimately, that's where it always remains, I think. You know, like with content creation, right? Like, specifically if it's something that's a true passion project, it's always going to be that. Like, even if it does end up being very well produced, right, and so on, it's always going to have that element of a very personal touch, right? I think like a really good example of like a combination of this is, you know, is when I look at something like Linus Tech Tips, right? This is obviously a really big media company at this point. Yeah. But you can still see that he's excited. Linus, and honestly the entire team, they love to talk about the latest technology. They love to talk about all these weird and bizarre things they've come and found, right? I think that's how content creation always is. You know, I've spoken about this weirdly enough recently on my stream as well a little bit, actually. And, you know, content creation for me, you know, it's obviously, you know, getting viewers and getting paid is nice, right? That's, in a way, to an extent, a necessity. You got to eat at some point. But I think the big part of it, and the part of it that will always be the biggest for me, it's about personal expression, right? Like, that's what content creation is. And I think you really see that. You see that in the successful channels, and you see that in I think, all the channels that are making good content, right?
It really is. You can tell. The audience can tell. Everyone can tell when someone is doing something because they've either been told to do it or because they know that at the end of the day it's a paycheck. No one can deny that it's fantastic to be able to make YouTube videos and Twitch stream a game that you enjoy and get paid for doing it. But what I really value is that we get paid because we provide something that the audience care about, and there's a truth that the audience can pick up on. The truth that they know that we love it as well. If we didn't love it, we wouldn't be able to keep doing it, man, because it's draining. It is super draining. I mean, you helped me out with that video recently, the truth about MMO content creators. I don't know if you've been keeping up with that, man, but that's on 600,000 views. That's done incredibly well. And everyone in that was just super, super passionate. So yeah, as soon as we can drag you away. I don't know what you think, chat, but I think that Teapot needs to be dragged away from his chair just for a weekend. I think you need to come with me to a convention. We need to have some drinks together. We need to take some pictures together. We need to play some games. And then maybe you need to hop on Guild Wars 1 with me. I keep telling you, man, you've got to come on Guild Wars 1. My necromancer needs some support, dude.
Yeah. I'd absolutely love to, yeah. We can certainly play some Guild Wars 1 as well. Definitely, I'm a bit of a noob in that game. I'm not gonna lie. I have, you know, beaten all the content, done the hard mode stuff. I've got God walking amongst mere mortals, but very, very casual. You know, Guild Wars 1 was something I would just play and relax and blast through while breaking the game by using all of the most abusive strategies possible. But yeah, 100%. I'd love to sometime. We're gonna hop on and do that.
Did you just say you've got God walking amongst mere mortals and then describe yourself as a casual?
Yes.
That's like saying, yeah, I've only got a 300-foot yacht. I'm not that wealthy.
Okay, well, I guess you could say I've got hours in the game, right? I'll give myself that. I will give myself that credit, I suppose.
You have done incredibly well with that, man. But no, I was making a video today. In fact, you can give me your opinion. You can let me know about this. So I am going to be I try and release videos weekly. You know what it's like, the content endless grind. But I have this short series called MMO Opinion where I just say what I think about things, and I want to know what you think about this. I think that multiplayer experiences within MMORPGs, such as dungeons or raids or any kind of skirmish things, I think they should be available far earlier than most games give you access to them. Because people say to me that the MMORPG is losing its social edge, it's becoming a single-player game, and while I value the fact that you can play it as a single player, I would love it if There were early game dungeons or raid style experiences that trained new players into how to play their class, into how to act within a group of players, into mechanics that they can come to expect, almost laying the foundation, if you will, for what the end game will become. What kind of early experiences do you think you'd want to add into Guild Wars 2 that would set a player up with the right skills for the end game?
Hey, it's a really interesting one. The first thing that comes to mind there is actually stuff in the stuff in the open world is not ideal for this, because when you kind of opt in to join a dungeon group, in a way you're kind of signing up that you might fail. And I think the problem with open world stuff is that in a way you kind of don't have as much control over joining an instance. So I think stuff like that would actually be really good. Yeah, I think that the idea that group content starts really late in the game, it is a bit of an archaic concept, actually, to be honest. I think a big part of it is actually like very largely to do with the way games kind of handle progression these days. I think previously, and I think in a way, dungeons did used to crop up a little bit earlier in older MMOs because they were less endgame focused. Whereas right now, I feel like MMOs are divided into two very distinct segments. You have leveling and then you have endgame. And they don't typically actually intersect that much. So I think that, yeah, I think it would be really good to do that. But in a way, it's unusual, because I think it's unusual because of the way that people engage with the game right now. I think that when players go, okay, so I'm going to do this dungeon, and why am I going to do this dungeon? Like, a lot of the time it's because, oh, you know, I want to get loot, I want to get better items, and having a dungeon like halfway through the leveling process, I think a lot of players might look at that and go, well, I'm going to replace this item. Like, do I really want to do this, or I just want to just keep leveling and get to the end game dungeons faster, right? And this is where I'd have like my like insane hot take, actually. In a lot of ways, I almost view like the idea of leveling to be a little bit outdated. I think progression systems are good, but I almost feel like everything in the game should almost be in some way relevant to your character extremely early on. So when you're making decisions and when you're doing stuff in the game really, really early, it actually means something. It actually does something, right? In that case, because I think that's what kind of causes almost like a slight disconnect from players wanting to engage in group content early. It's because they feel like they aren't necessarily going to get any value out of doing that, because it's just going to be essentially destroyed almost immediately.
You know what's amazing is you and me think almost exactly the same on this. I've already written the script, and you've pretty much echoed the sentiments that I've got. What you've described is the idea of dividing the game world into brackets of relevancy based on levels, based on account age, based on the thing you're trying to get. So if you're a brand new player, you have a very small amount of the world that's relevant to you. And as you progress and as you level, in theory, what's meant to happen is more areas open up and become relevant, therefore increasing the size of the game. But what actually happens is, as you unlock new areas that become relevant, older areas become irrelevant. So the size of the game that is relevant to you at any given moment doesn't actually change that much in traditional MMORPGs. I very much would like a game where an early experience still has relevance to a much higher level player. There's multiple ways of doing this. People have done it with level scaling. People have done it with increasing the item when you get the drop. There are various ways, but I do think we need to look into how we can make an MMORPG always relevant to the player that's doing it, because otherwise you're losing content. I always find it ironic that when a game brings out an expansion, that word expansion implies an increase in size. But actually it often decreases the size of the world, because now everything relevant is in a much smaller area than the rest of the world. World of Warcraft is the worst offender for this. They say, hey, here's an expansion. I'm thinking, haha, what you actually mean is, here's what's relevant and everything else now doesn't matter.
Yeah. And this is where you run into the issue with vertical progression. Because watching the numbers go up and getting that sick new purple item, that feels good, right? That's a really enjoyable feeling. But alongside that, it's really hard to have both of those things while also keeping stuff relevant. I think the obvious way to do that would essentially be to, as you say, right, like essentially say, okay, well, you can get all this new really super high level gear from old content as well. It levels up all of the old items. That's the way you can do that. But I think vertical progression is really hard to handle here. And this is where I think it turns into a really fascinating discussion about human psychology, right? And why we like to play games and why players like to play games. And I think this is when you start talking about stuff like, what do people actually like about games? Do they like gameplay? Or do they like what they get from the gameplay? And I think more often than not, or certainly with demographics of players, then there are definitely large demographics of players that actually care a lot more about what they get rather than the game itself. And, you know, I hear this a lot. I'm sure you've come across this too, where a player will say like, oh, I hate this game mode. I hate it, but I've got to do it to get the reward. And my response is, well, why are you doing it if you don't like it? So I got to get the reward though. I need it. It's going to feel so good when I get it. And of course, it's absolutely right.
The void armor from pest control.
Exactly.
I don't like doing 6 hours of pest control every time I start a new RuneScape Iron Man, but I need the void armor, so I'll do it for 6 hours. Everyone in the chat that's played RuneScape knows what this is like. No, you're spot on. You're spot on that people say, when I say to a player, are you having fun? It's really weird because if I'm sat there watching someone play Uncharted, one of my favourite games. In fact, I went cosplaying as Nathan Drake this weekend to an anime convention called Kitacon that I will tell you about in a second because there were some funny moments there. But if I'm watching someone playing a game like Tomb Raider, like Uncharted, like Dark Souls, and I say to someone, are you having fun? They always normally say, yeah, this game's awesome. But whenever you say to an MMORPG player, are you having fun? There's a moment where they have to almost process the answer. Like, they want to say yes, but there's a moment where they think about it and they look at you and they're like, kind of? Maybe? I don't know. I've got to think about this. And I'm thinking, if your answer isn't an enthusiastic yes, what are you doing? And that's when you get to the point where when they get to the drop, the rare thing, and you say to them, are you having fun? Suddenly it's an amazing yes. Then it's a yeah, better than anything in the entire world. This is a fantastic feeling. And then you realize that what it is if you imagine happiness on a scale from 0 to 100 with most people existing at, 60 to 70 constantly, the MMORPG player just swings wildly from 20 to like 4,000. And when the good thing happens, it's the best thing in the world. When the bad thing happens, or when the regular game happens, it's just kind of dull and boring. But it's that dopamine rush. It's that moment of this is it that is worth it for a lot of people.
Yeah. MMOs are weird. Very weird.
They really are, man.
They're a
really
weird type of game. Yeah. No, I do.
love them, but they are weird.
Yeah, it is very unusual, and that it turns into such a difficult and weird, complicated thing because, of course, there's almost like no right way to play them as well. Like, there's going to be such a varied opinion on how players engage and what they like about MMOs because of how massive and diverse they are. That it just turns into a really big sprawling dialogue that you can have about like the nature of games like this. It's very unusual.
Oh, absolutely, and there's no right answer. People say to me, so what's the right answer? And I'd say if there was a right answer, we'd have found it probably just after EverQuest launched. Just after Meridian 59 came out, we'd have probably done some questions and think, there we go, that's the answer we found. Different people want different experiences, and one of the biggest problems, I think, with MMORPGs is the MMORPG genre is so varied that there is no answer that fits it, because you don't do this, or not many people do this, with other genres. Like if someone walks up to me and says, hey, I like FPS games, I like first-person shooters, I'll look back and go, like Portal. And they'll go, no, not like Portal. I'll be, well, that's a first-person shooter. And then they'll say, oh, yeah, but it's not like that. And I'll say, oh, like Mirror's Edge. And they'll go, well, no, that's not a first-person shooter. I'll be like, no, it is. It is, because there's first-person and there's shooting in the game. But what I'm trying to get at with this is it's so varied that just the genre isn't enough to define all the games in the genre anymore. We need subgenres, and that hasn't happened yet. What subgenre would you put Guild Wars 2 in? Because you'd have to describe horizontal progression. You'd have to describe open world. You'd have to describe multiple classes. What kind of subgenres of MMORPGs are we going to create next?
Yeah, it's a really good point, I think, actually. That's a very, very salient thing to comment on, right? Because I think there's often a risk with MMOs to actually not do that enough, I almost feel like, actually. I think that games often try to... they don't know what they want to do. I would actually say that games like World of Warcraft suffer from this, where they kind of don't... like, are we going for casual players or hardcore players? Like, what about these, like, crazy progression systems, but we also want to make it, like, really hardcore at the same time, but also really new player friendly? What about New World? We're doing a PvP game? Actually, no, not really anymore. How about we're going to do this instead, right? I think, like, finding your identity as an MMO is insanely important, actually. And honestly, I think that's something that Guild Wars 2 has really struggled with, actually, over the years as well. Like, one time, okay, we're going to do... like open world, and it's going to be kind of a PvP world versus world game. That was very much the direction the game originally went in. Like the PvE was there, you get your gear, and then boom, world versus world, esports level PvP, awesome. But actually, then we're going to do raids. It's going to be a raiding game. Oh, hang on, no, let's not do that. We want to be HBO. We want to make a movie game, which is kind of what we saw with Path of Fire. Very cinematic, very grandiose in the storytelling, all this kind of stuff. You know, I think that there is a big tendency for games to not know what they want in a way, but I think there's a reason for that, and I think it's the same reason, but from the other end as the developer, right? It's hard to know what you want to do. It's hard to understand what people want to an extent, because it's a very, very difficult question, and they are such a diverse and massive beast that it's hard to keep track of that. You know, even if you're actually developing the game, you know, who knows? Who knows what MMO you're going to make?
No, you're spot on, because when someone says to me MMORPG, there's such a vast difference between even Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2. Two games within the same franchise play so fundamentally differently. Guild Wars 1 is an online RPG, whereas Guild Wars 2 is a massively multiplayer adventure game that has RPG elements, and we have to start defining these, and the MMORPG genre has so many experiences within it that finding the correct definitions for all of them is getting more and more and more complicated. Speaking about conventions, at some point we will be dragging you to Insomnia. I went to Kitacon this weekend, which is an anime convention in Warwick up in the UK. I don't know if you're big into anime. Are you an anime dude?
Not honestly, not an anime enjoyer. You know, I've seen one anime. I was forced to watch anime for a sub goal. But what, you think you can change that? I'm gonna return a week. We can change that.
Oh yeah, we're gonna sit down. We're gonna watch some good anime. My favorite one is Steins Gate, which is a fantastic anime show. But no, Death Note's pretty good. Attack on Titan's fun. But I went to an anime convention because I'm fine being a weeb. I'm okay with this. The problem is there was a couple of panels that we went to, a couple of people that we listened to, a couple of talks given by creators. And then there was a hentai quiz panel.
Ooh.
And apparently everyone gets dragged along to it. So there were like 500 people there. And I'm going to be honest with you, man. I did embarrassingly well.
Oh.
At the panel.
Oh, hang on.
I know, there were questions. Yeah. They were asking about terminology. They were asking about what happens next. And you had to stand up and hold a little piece of paper. There's a picture, I'll send it you. There's a picture of me standing up in cosplay as Nathan Drake, the only person left standing in the auditorium. And part of me thought, what decisions have I made in life that got me to this point? And then I thought, you know what? They were the right decisions. I would make them again in a heartbeat. But no, this most surreal part of the weekend. I only ever wear white shirts and waistcoats because I threw away all my other clothes. Honestly, if you open up my closet, it looks like that episode of Dragon Ball Z where it's just the same orange jumpsuit again and again and again. And someone walked up to me halfway through and went, I'm sorry to disturb you, but are you cosplaying as Josh Strife Hayes?
Oh!
And I had to look at them and be like,
funny, actually.
Be like, no, it's actually me. And their face just kind of twisted and went, oh my god, I'm so sorry. Because they thought that I looked kind of like me, but not enough like me to be me, which I thought was great. But yeah, we're going to drag you out the house, man. We're going to get you to some conventions. We're going to get you involved in the UK scene and stuff like that.
That's big.
But what are you thinking?
I like it.
So come on. What are you thinking about this Guild Wars 2 release on Steam? How is this going to affect the game's future? Obviously, you're seeing an insane boost right now. You are pulling incredible numbers and entertaining the audience remarkably well as you do it. What's the future for Guild Wars 2 like, in your opinion?
I think right now, Guild Wars 2 is very much in this long-term investment phase. I think all of the stuff they're doing right now is because they're very much focused on the future. Right, so if we kind of look at what we know they're already doing another expansion. They actually confirmed this extremely early. Obviously, it's early days, right? But that is coming. And I think a lot of the stuff they're doing right now, they've been polishing the new player experience. They've been re-adding old content to make sure there's a cohesive story experience, which is very important to the game, right? They're looking at reworking some of the systems like fractals. They're looking at raids. They've added this new system with strike missions, with challenge modes. They've kind of tested the water and attracted the attention of some pretty remarkable players. There was this recent boss added, I was talking about a little bit earlier on stream, threatening to make you do it. And it actually was so difficult, it took basically the best guilds in the game, took around a week to kill, and it even attracted the attention of Liquid Maximum, right? It was, of course, a world's first raider in World of Warcraft. I had a chat with him on stream, actually talking about world's first and stuff like that. Alliances are on their way, a world versus world restructure. They've started focusing on the balance of the game a lot more. To me, ArenaNet are thinking 2 years from now, right? They are super long-term. That's not to say they're not going to do anything until then. Obviously, they are, right? That doesn't make any sense. But I think they are very heavily investing in the game right now, and they really want to push Guild Wars 2 as a massive player in the MMO scene, right? Particularly, I think, in the areas of, I would say, the world versus world. They want to hit the realm versus realm demographic really hard. And I think they also want to hit the story and also Endgame PvE. I think they want to try and capture some of the Endgame PvE audience just based by... There's no way they would release a boss like that if they didn't want to, right? I think they're really looking to take the game as far as they can go with it. And they're heavily investing in their product and cleaning up the problems with it and thinking about the future. That's right.
I'm really happy that they're doing that because I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, but I think Guild Wars 2 has for a long time been really bad at marketing itself. It's a great experience. It's probably, and I think this will remain true for a long time, it's probably the most efficient money that I've ever spent on an MMORPG. I mean, I bought all the expansions when they were on sale for like 20 quid, and that was years ago. And I can still log on and I can still play and I've still got my power. And I never feel worried that anything I do in Guild Wars 2 is going to become irrelevant. I never feel worried that if I don't log on within the next month or two, I'm going to lose all of my progress. I spent a tiny amount of cash many years ago and I still have thousands of hours of gameplay ahead of me that isn't being taken away. Very few games give you that. And yet, Guild Wars 2 really doesn't seem to be jumping on the marketing bandwagon, the marketing push that it could have, that it should be going to. I mean, most games put half of their budget into marketing. The Witcher 3 famously cost 300 million to make, spent 160 million on marketing alone. Guild Wars 2 seems to throw it all into the game, which of course gives us a great game, but not that many people know about it. But what I am interested in is, people have just pointed this out, Guild Wars 2 is one of the highest viewed MMORPGs on Twitch right now. It has more viewers than Path of Exile. It has more viewers than World of Warcraft. It has more viewers than Hearthstone. Now, a couple of years ago, I think it would have been almost impossible to imagine a world where Warcraft wasn't the king. Everyone looked at World of Warcraft and thought, they can do no wrong. Nothing beyond terrible company management is going to ever destroy the stranglehold that World of Warcraft has on the MMORPG scene. But then we saw Final Fantasy get that boost. And now we're seeing Guild Wars 2 get that boost. And I think that the age of Warcraft is well and truly coming to a close. It's not dead yet, but I think people are realizing that World of Warcraft hasn't, for so long, had to fight for its position. It's been coasting on what it had already. But now it's got to fight. It's got to actually prove that it deserves the position it has. And when you put it side to side with games like Final Fantasy XIV and Guild Wars 2, I think a lot of people are starting to realize that Guild Wars 2 is better.
Yeah, I think that's true. We do kind of live in... It's weird to say that, because I think that when we talk about MMOs, we almost say, oh, it's a a dead genre, right? It's a niche genre. But in another way, it's almost, to an extent, the golden age in terms of the actual quality of these games, because there is that competition now. There's a lot of competition for MMOs, and I think the developers are honestly being really pushed to innovate and make their products and games as well as they possibly can. So yeah, it's even though there's not the most players, I think compared to like the previous era of the kind of the 13 million sub days of something like World of Warcraft, the games are really good. They're really good right now, and they're getting better as well. Like there's maybe not WoW, but they're broadly speaking getting better.
No, absolutely. I'm sure you have as well. We get emails every week, every few days from companies wanting us to advertise everything to everyone, from mobile games to NFTs to, all that random crap that we tend to say no to, unless it's a really good company. And finally, I think Guild Wars 2 are starting to contact the streamers and the YouTubers to push some advertising and to do some sponsored videos. And they were one of the few companies, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to because I'm proud of it. They were one of the few companies that didn't want to read my sponsorship script before I put it in the video. They just kind of went, yeah, whatever you say, it's fine. We're confident in our product. We know you're going to be fair to it. Say what you think is fair. Because all these other companies, mobile phone games especially, they give you a script to read.
Oh, yeah.
If you ever wondered why every single...
It's always a meme, right? Yeah.
God, if you ever wonder why every single Big Daddy, raidy, shady advert sounds exactly the same, it's because you are just reading off a script. But Guild Wars 2 was so bloody confident in their own product. They just said, hey Josh, play the game and say what you think about it. If you think it's good, then just say it's good. If you think it's bad, say it's bad. And they were only confident doing that because they know it's good.
Yeah. I think it's such a weird thing when we talk about the marketing in that regard as well, because you brought up that the game doesn't market itself super well, and it's weird, yeah, because in my opinion, a lot of the marketing historically, they've really changed this up a little bit now actually, but I've never felt like they've really shouted about what makes the game great. It's always very kind of wishy-washy, like, come play our game and explore the world and, make your character and, wow, it's so good, guys, come play the game. They're not saying, yeah, our game's got the best world versus world. They're not flexing on people. And I think they really should, because there are some amazing, I'm a little biased, but there are some really remarkable things about Guild Wars 2. It is a game that is different in a lot of ways, and it's different in a lot of very good ways that have actually, in my opinion, to an extent, reimagined and innovated the genre a fair bit. It does things better than other MMOs. But weirdly enough, it almost feels like ArenaNet, they're like, they're so laid back about their game, they actually forget to tell everyone, like that's the...
That's an excellent... It's like the marketing crew wake up every few months, they're like, oh crap, we've got a game.
Yeah.
We should probably tell people about this. But when I'm sitting there in my desk and I think I've got a few hours free and I need to play some MMOs for fun, to keep that passion alive, and I'm looking at Star Wars The Old Republic, and I'm looking at RuneScape, and I'm looking at Final Fantasy XIV, and it always just boils down to me going, I'll just jump on Guild Wars 2 for a bit. Because it's so easy for me to get back into, and the limited amount of skills means that I never fully forget what I'm doing. And even if I do forget what I'm doing, I just run forward and smash everything on the keyboard and seem to do pretty well, which I like. Someone mentioned in the chat that they saw Rage Darling's video on my first time Guild Wars 2. Rage made a video. She's a fantastic up-and-coming kind of MMORPG YouTuber, and she chose Guild Wars 2 as one of her first review games. I'm trying to encourage her to review and play more. But one thing that I noticed was the comments to her video were remarkably positive. And people were extremely inviting and encouraging her to do more. The Guild Wars 2 community, I think, has accepted that... You said earlier that it wanted to be one of the kind of hardcore esports PvP things when it first started.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the community has accepted that it's not a hardcore esport PvP, and that's okay. Which means you can be silly in it, you can have fun, and you can value the gameplay over the super rare epic loot. And it's fostered this really inviting community. I think, in general, Guild Wars 2 has one of the most welcoming communities from all the games that I've played.
It is. It is definitely a very cozy community. And I think that a big part of that is because of, again, the way the game is set up. The game is set up so that when you interact with other players, it's almost impossible to kind of screw people over, right? Like, there's no potential for a lot of negative interactions a lot of the time. And I think that really does encourage players to be very wholesome and be very helpful to other players, right? Like, helping another player is always going to be a good thing. You're not really going to be necessarily in competition. Now, there definitely have been some friction points, and, I have to bring this up, actually. It is necessary. I was kind of slightly dancing around this at the start of this conversation, but open world is a very interesting thing in the game. And there was a boss released with End of Dragons. And it was called Dragon's End. It's this open world map. And it took it was like a 1.5 to 2 hour long map with a preparation phase where you'd have to go around and complete events to power up a little bit so you could make yourself stronger. And then you would do a series of challenges where you have to push through the map and eventually fight a giant dragon at the end. Very bread and butter Guild Wars 2 stuff.
Okay, sounds good so far. I can't see a way this could possibly go wrong.
Now here's the problem. The boss was quite hard. It was hard to the point where I believe 90% of maps were failing.
Ooh, that's quite hard.
Yeah. And this caused a bit of a schism in the community, to say the least, actually. Words were exchanged. Various words were exchanged by the community. The Reddit was on fire. It was burning down. And I do think the Guild Wars 2 is really friendly when it's united, but there are certainly moments where there are pretty aggressive friction points. I think the reason why Guild Wars 2 appears to be really, really positive is because almost all the time, everyone's working together, right? Everyone is pushing in the same direction. But I think that there is actually some kind of division under the surface that just never happens because players who almost have different interests, like the hardcore PvE players, they don't bother the casual PvE players. And vice versa, right? Like, they don't have to, there's no friction there. They're not, like, screwing each other over, ruining each other's fun. It never happens. But when that does come together, you in a way, you almost see more fireworks because people aren't used to friction, right? It was a bloodbath, actually, like, on the release of this. So yeah, I completely get why you say that, and I think it is 100% true. I think when everyone's pushing in the same direction, everyone is super wholesome and extremely welcoming. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. That's for sure.
Oh no, whenever you get a large amount of people together and a large amount of developers trying to create something, you're always going to find those friction points. But what I have spotted and what I have noticed over the years, and I hope Guild Wars 2 can keep doing this as well as it does, sometimes you don't necessarily need to have the best update out of every single game ever, every single time. Sometimes one of the best ways to survive is to simply be good enough for a long enough time and wait for all of your competition to make a mistake. And I think we're seeing this with Final Fantasy XIV. It's been remarkably good. It's been good enough for a hell of a long time. And now it's just kind of sitting back and watching World of Warcraft make all the mistakes. And Guild Wars 2 has been good enough for a hell of a long time, above average without a doubt, and now it's just sitting back and watching all of the other games that are in competition with it slowly make mistakes. It's one of those things where you don't need to be the absolute best all the time. You just need to provide what the player base want for a long enough time that eventually when people discover it, they kind of nod and go, yeah, this is actually really good. I enjoy this. This is fantastic.
Yeah, this is absolutely right. And I think that it's super difficult to actually, like, MMOs are unusual in this respect, because to get players to move from one game to the other, like, there is this element of, there almost needs to be a mistake, because there needs to be a motive for a player to move from a game that they've potentially invested thousands of hours in, and then move to a potentially totally new product where they're going to have to start from scratch, right? That's a big ask, right? When you think about the hours, people have like 5,000 hours, 10,000 hours, 20,000 hours, 10 years of playing an MMO, right? Like, that's actually a part of your life at that point, right? In a very big and very relevant way. So yeah, there is this slightly unusual and sticky nature of players in MMOs that I think isn't as present in other genres, where like just being an awesome game doesn't actually necessarily mean that you're going to steal all the players, right? Because players are so invested and they have so much kind of love. They have so much love, right? For the game that they play, right? I think that video games, they're often disrespected, in my opinion. Like, people don't give them the credit they deserve. It's like, oh, it's just a game, bro. It's just a video game. But I think this is a very, very harsh and reductive statement to make about games. Like, you can meet anyone online. Like, I know loads of people have met partners. It's a bit cliche, but it's true, right? People have met partners online. People have made lifelong friends. I know I have online. That is powerful, right? That is a very, very powerful thing to have in a game, I think. It's pretty insane.
It's massive. It's a cultural phenomenon. It's part of the fabric of our society now. And when people say it's just a game, you can say that about anything that anyone is passionate about. It's just a sport. It's just a hobby. It's just a social group. It's just a university. It's just a family member. It's just a friend you've known for a long time. You can be reductionist to anything like that, but what truly matters is what it means to you. It may just be a game to somebody else in the same way that your favorite book or film or song might mean more to you than just that book or that film or that song. It may have a special place in your heart. It may have been important to you at a moment in your life that it ended up being much more relevant than you expected it to. For example, I had a PlayStation 2 when I was younger, and me and my little brother used to try and find as many two-player games as we could. But ultimately the only one we could find that we both enjoyed was a snowboarding game called SSX Tricky. And we played that game to death. We absolutely loved it. We finished it all the time. So when I see SSX Tricky in a charity shop or CEX or any kind of second-hand shop, there's that smile, because that game means more to me than just snowboarding. That game has memories, and that's just a PlayStation 2 game. When you start to look at MMORPGs, it does become part of your personality. This, of course, is one of the most dangerous things with enfranchised players thinking that if you criticize the game, you're criticizing them. We had this long talk when you were gracious enough to do the interview, and we talked about all that. But it is always dangerous and difficult to critique something that someone makes a part of their personality so much. And a lot of people have said to me that even though they enjoy the worst MMO ever series, where I play the first 8 to 10 hours of a game and then try and make a somewhat humorous review on it, I know that that's not a full review of what the game can be, because an MMORPG takes hundreds of hours. In the time you can finish a regular video game, you may not have even seen every story of every class in any given MMORPG. I very much want to find time to create endgame reviews of games, but I'm also aware that doing this is, it's risky on YouTube. Imagine only putting out one video every 2 or 3 weeks. Imagine saying, sorry guys, no content for the next month. I've got to finish every class in Guild Wars 2. I've got to finish Final Fantasy 14. It's a ridiculous ask, but I feel that as time goes on, it is becoming a more and more realistic ask. So when I try and finish Guild Wars 2, I'm going to need your help setting some dungeon groups up.
Oh, don't worry, I've got you covered there. That won't be a problem. I'm curious. I'm super curious. Like, how far would you want to go on that? Would you want to beat every boss in the game, or just like a good selection of them?
And this is another interesting question, because whenever I make any video or whenever I talk about an MMORPG in any context, people always shoot back with, but you haven't finished it. And that's very true. I suppose the way I look at it is, imagine that you got a purple belt, or equivalent of, in every martial art. So you hadn't mastered any of them, but you had a relatively thorough understanding of the basics and the foundations of many of them. That is the situation I find myself in with MMORPGs. I can probably talk with some authority about old school RuneScape, and I feel that I know enough about the old World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 1 and Final Fantasy 14 to at least hold my own in a discussion, but I definitely wouldn't be able to discuss the minutiae or the nuances of it. it's very difficult to finish an MMORPG, but I feel that I want to make videos on games when I would feel confident that I could hold my own in a debate or a discussion with people who would consider themselves experts. I mean, there is no way I'm ever going to be able to out trivia you on Guild Wars 2. I just wouldn't be able to learn that much stuff. You've got so many years and you know so much about how this game works. But I would like to be able to sit across from you at a table and at least say a couple of things that make you nod and then make you think, yeah, that's pretty specific knowledge right there. So if you could help me get to that level with Guild Wars 2, all I have to do is find someone to help me with Elder Scrolls Online, World of Warcraft, RuneScape, Final Fantasy XIV, Guild Wars 1, Star Wars The Old Republic, Black Desert Online, every other game.
Yeah,
but,
easy.
Yeah, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Well, what I'm going to do is head off and continue writing this video. I've got to prepare for the Insomnia Fest. If anyone's at Insomnia, feel free to say hi. You are going to continue entertaining and killing it with 10,000 viewers. You are leading the charge with the Guild Wars 2 marketing right now. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat to me, dude. Thank you everyone in chat as well for hanging around. Stick with Teapot. He is the absolute de facto leader on knowing about Guild Wars 2. Thank you so much for your time, dude, and I'll chat to you in the future. Take care.
I really appreciate it, man. Have a wonderful evening. Take it easy. Good luck.
Thanks.